It was an important day on Sodor, and all the engines wanted to be clean, shiny, and splendid. One day, a very important goods train had arrived from the mainland. One day, the engines were discussing who would pull the very important goods train. All the engines wanted to be chosen, except Percy. Driver says this goods train is nothing special than the mail train, said Percy. And I suppose James doesn't like pulling goods train, said Thomas. Maybe he should pull it next year. Me, said James. I thought you said goods trains were important, Thomas.
I'd rather be shunting freight cars than pulling dirty goods trains, said Gordon. Say aye.
Aye, said Thomas, Percy, and James together. Thomas was impressed. You know what, said Thomas. Maybe I should pull the very important goods train. And I think you should take it next year, James. No goods trains until next year, James said excitedly. For the rest of this year, I'm pulling coaches. That's good, said Thomas. For now, I'm going to the quarry. Thomas was happy. He was glad that he decided to pull the very important goods train. I'm sure Sir Topham Hatt would think pulling the very important goods train is far better than sitting in the sheds doing nothing, said Thomas. Thomas was enjoying himself. Goods train coming through, he whistled whenever he passed by passenger trains. Soon, Thomas arrived at the quarry. Mavis was surprised. Hello, Thomas, hooted Mavis. I thought James was supposed to come to the quarry today. Well, Mavis, said Thomas, I wanted to pull the very important goods train this year. James is pulling this train next year. Did Sir Topham Hatt tell you that? Asked Mavis. Thomas was only making this up, but Mavis believed him. Well, said Thomas, maybe I should push these freight cars into a sleigh topper. How about that? One by one, Thomas shunted his freight cars at the sleigh topper. Okay, Mavis, whistled Thomas. I'm ready to go now. Okay, Thomas, said Mavis. Now remember, if Sir Topham Hatt says no, then you shouldn't do James's work. Don't worry, Mavis, said Thomas. James is pulling passengers for the rest of the year. And he puffed proudly away. Thomas was having a wonderful day. Must get the job done, must get the job done, he sang. But Thomas didn't know that the rails were rusty. As he sped across the rusty rails, his freight cars of slate came off the track and into the field. Cinders and ashes, cried Thomas. My freight cars are all off the rails. And they were. Thomas knew Mavis was right. James should have taken the very important train. Oh dear, groaned Thomas. What will I do now? Soon, James arrived with the breakdown train. He could see that Thomas was upset. What's the matter, Thomas? Asked James. Were you going too fast? James, said Thomas, I know you don't like pulling goods trains, but can you bring the breakdown train over to my freight cars? I think Percy should take the very important goods train instead of you. Then why didn't you tell Percy earlier? Asked James. Thomas didn't answer. So James moved forward a few inches toward the freight cars. Soon, James stopped beside the freight cars and quickly got to work. In no time, all the freight cars were back on the tracks. "Thank you, James," said Thomas. "Can I pull the very important goods train now?" asked James. "No, James," said Thomas. "You have visitors to collect from the docks. I need to give the very important goods train to Percy." "If you say so, Thomas," whistled James, and he puffed happily away. That afternoon, Thomas arrived at the station. He thought Percy was going to be cross, but he wasn't. "Hello, Percy," said Thomas. "I'm sorry I tricked you." "It's all right, Thomas," said Percy. "What can I do to help?" "Well," said Thomas, "since the old branch line is a bit rusty, could you pull the very important goods train on the smooth line?" "Since we're best friends," said Percy, "then yes, Thomas, we will." Soon Percy was coupled to the very important goods train. Soon it was time for Percy to leave. "Thanks for sharing, Thomas," whistled Percy. "My pleasure," said Thomas happily.